The year is 490 BCE. You're standing on the windswept plains of Marathon, heart-pounding as a ragtag Greek army, outnumbered, outarmed, and outmatched, surges forward in a full-throttle charge against the colossal might of the Persian Empire. Bronze clashes with bronze, dust rises in chaotic clouds, and the fate of the Western world hangs by a thread. This isn't just another chapter of ancient bloodshed. This is the spark that ignites 1,000 years of Western identity. Welcome to the epic saga of the Greco-Persian Wars, a collision of empires, cultures, and destinies that would echo across history for millennia. The Greco-Persian Wars, raging from 499 to 449 BCE, are among the most electrifying David versus Goliath tales ever recorded. On one side, the Persian Empire, a sprawling colossus, the greatest the world had known, stretching from the icy peaks of the Hindu Kush to the sun-baked sands of Egypt, commanding armies that numbered in the hundreds of thousands. On the other, a scattered patchwork of independent Greek city-states, constantly bickering, fiercely proud, and seemingly doomed in the face of imperial dominance. Yet from this unlikely crucible of resistance would rise some of history's most legendary battles, and the survival of ideals like freedom, democracy, and individualism that still pulse through the veins of our modern world. To understand the magnitude of what the Greeks faced, we must first comprehend the sheer scope of Persian power. By 500 BCE, the Persian Empire, also known as the Achaemenid Empire, had grown to encompass over 2 million square miles. Founded by Cyrus the Great in the 6th century BCE, this empire had swallowed whole civilizations that had dominated the ancient world for centuries. The Persians were not mere conquerors. They were sophisticated administrators who had perfected the art of empire building. Their system of satrapies, or provinces, allowed them to govern diverse populations while maintaining central control from their magnificent capitals at Persepolis and Susa. The Persian army was a multicultural force, drawing warriors from across the known world, immortals from Persia itself, mounted archers from Scythia, war elephants from India, and elite troops from every corner of their vast domain served under the banner of the King of Kings. What made the Persian Empire particularly formidable was not just its size, but its organizational capacity. The Persians had built the world's first international highway system, the Royal Road, which allowed for rapid communication and troop movement across their territories. Their postal system was so efficient that it inspired the motto of the modern United States Postal Service. This was an empire that had conquered Babylon, subjugated Egypt, and pushed deep into Central Asia and India. By any measure, they seemed unstoppable. The Persian approach to conquest was typically pragmatic. They often allowed conquered peoples to maintain their local customs and religions as long as they acknowledged Persian supremacy and paid tribute. This policy had worked remarkably well across their empire, but the Greeks would prove to be a different challenge entirely. To call ancient Greece a unified nation would be a gross oversimplification. The Greek world in 500 BCE was a patchwork of independent city-states, each fiercely proud of its autonomy and often at odds with its neighbors. From the commercial powerhouse of Athens to the military machine of Sparta, from the naval forces of Aegina to the colonies scattered across the Mediterranean, the Greeks shared a common language and culture, but were politically fragmented. This fragmentation, however, was also their strength. The Greek city-state system had given birth to revolutionary concepts that would forever change human civilization. In Athens, democracy was taking root, giving ordinary citizens a voice in governance for the first time in human history. The concept of the citizen soldier meant that those who fought for their city had a stake in its government and future. Philosophy, theater, art, and scientific inquiry flourished in this environment of intellectual freedom. Yet this very independence that made Greek culture so vibrant also made the Greeks seemingly vulnerable to Persian domination. How could scattered, often hostile city-states hope to stand against an empire that had conquered the known world? The answer would lie not in their numbers or their wealth, but in their willingness to die for ideals that transcended mere survival. The Greco-Persian Wars didn't begin with a grand declaration or a formal challenge. Instead, they started with what seemed like a minor provincial rebellion in 499 BCE. The Greek cities of Ionia, located on the western coast of Asia Minor in present-day Turkey, had been under Persian rule for decades. These cities, including the great metropolis of Miletus, were Greek in culture but Persian in allegiance. The Ionian Greeks chafed under Persian rule, not necessarily because it was oppressive, but because it was foreign. They longed for the freedom to govern themselves according to Greek customs and traditions. When Aristagoras, the tyrant of Miletus, decided to rebel against Persian authority, he needed allies. He turned to his fellow Greeks across the Aegean Sea. The response was mixed. Most Greek city-states, recognizing the futility of challenging Persian power, declined to help. But Athens, flush with democratic idealism, and perhaps not fully grasping the consequences, sent 20 ships to aid the rebels. The small city-state of Eretria contributed 5 more vessels. It seemed like a minor gesture of solidarity among Greeks, but it would have enormous consequences. The Ionian revolt initially achieved some spectacular successes. The rebels managed to capture and burn Sardis, the capital of the Persian satrapy of Lydia. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Persian power might crumble in the face of Greek determination. But the Persian Empire had not conquered half the known world by giving up easily. Persian forces regrouped, reinforcements arrived, and one by one, the rebel cities fell. The revolt's end came in 494 B.C.E. with the naval Battle of Plataea and the subsequent destruction of Miletus. The city was razed, its population killed or enslaved, and the rebellion was crushed with characteristic Persian efficiency. But the damage was done. Darius I, the Persian king of kings, had been embarrassed by Greeks. More importantly, Athens and Eretria had dared to burn a Persian city. In the Persian worldview, such defiance could not go unpunished. Darius's response was swift and decisive. If the Greeks wanted to interfere in Persian affairs, they would learn the price of defying the King of Kings. In 492 B.C.E., he launched the first Persian invasion of Greece, initially led by his son-in-law Mardonius. This first attempt met with mixed results due to storms and local resistance, but it served as a reconnaissance force, gathering intelligence about Greek capabilities and weaknesses. 2 years later, in 490 B.C.E., Darius mounted a more focused campaign. Rather than attempting a massive land invasion, he opted for a naval expedition targeting Athens and Eretria directly. The Persian fleet, commanded by Artaphernes and Datis, sailed across the Aegean with perhaps 25,000 troops and a mandate for revenge. Eretria fell quickly, its population enslaved, and the city burned in retaliation for its support of the Ionian revolt. Then the Persians landed at Marathon, a coastal plain about 26 miles northeast of Athens. The choice of landing site was strategically sound, offering good terrain for Persian cavalry and a direct route to Athens. The Athenians faced an agonizing decision. They could retreat behind their city walls and hope to withstand a siege, or they could march out to meet the Persians in open battle. The odds seemed impossibly long. Athens could field perhaps 10,000 hoplites, heavy infantry soldiers, against a Persian force of 25,000 or more. Moreover, the Persians were veterans of countless campaigns, while many of the Athenians had never seen serious combat. The Athenians chose to fight. Under the leadership of the general Miltiades, the Athenian army marched to Marathon. They were joined by about 1,000 allies from the small city of Plataea, a gesture of solidarity that would be remembered for centuries. Sparta, typically, was observing a religious festival and could not march until it concluded, though they promised to come as soon as possible. For several days, the two armies faced each other across the plain of Marathon. The Greeks held the high ground, but they were vastly outnumbered. Persian cavalry prowled the plain below, while archers prepared their deadly volleys. It seemed like a standoff that could only end in Greek defeat or withdrawal. Then Miltiades made a decision that would echo through history. Rather than wait for reinforcements that might never come, he ordered an attack. But this wasn't a conventional assault. Miltiades had studied Persian tactics and knew that their strength lay in their center, where their elite troops and archers were concentrated. His plan was audacious. Weaken the Greek center deliberately, strengthen the wings, and attempt a double envelopment. On the morning of September 12, 490 BCE, the Athenians and Plataeans charged across nearly a mile of open ground at a dead run. This was unprecedented in Greek warfare, where battles typically began with a slow, measured advance. The Greek center, as planned, began to buckle under Persian pressure, but the strengthened wings crashed into the Persian flanks with devastating effect. What followed was chaos. The Persian center, pressed forward in pursuit of the retreating Greek center, suddenly found itself surrounded as the Greek wings wheeled inward. Persian discipline, so effective in previous campaigns, began to crumble in the face of this unexpected tactic. The slaughter was immense as Persian troops, trapped and unable to use their numerical advantage effectively, were cut down by Greek bronze spears and swords. The Battle of Marathon was over in a matter of hours, but its consequences would last for centuries. The Persians lost approximately 6,400 men, while Greek casualties numbered only 192. It was a victory so complete, so unexpected, that it seemed miraculous to contemporary observers. Legend has it that a Greek messenger named Phidippides ran the entire 26 miles from Marathon to Athens to announce the victory, collapsing and dying after delivering his message. While historians debate the accuracy of this specific story, it gave birth to the modern marathon race and symbolizes the extraordinary nature of the Greek achievement. But the marathon was more than just a military victory. It proved that the Persian Empire could be defeated, that Greek courage and tactics could overcome seemingly impossible odds. The psychological impact was enormous, giving the Greeks confidence that they could resist Persian domination while sending shockwaves throughout the Persian Empire. The victory at Marathon bought the Greeks 10 years of breathing space, but few believed that the Persians would simply accept defeat and abandon their ambitions in Greece. Darius spent the remainder of his reign planning revenge, but his death in 486 B.C.E. elevated his son, Xerxes, to the throne, a man determined to complete his father's unfinished business. Xerxes was not content with a limited expedition like his father's. He envisioned a massive invasion that would not merely punish Athens and Eretria, but would bring all of Greece under Persian rule permanently. The scale of his preparations was unprecedented, involving years of planning and resource gathering from across the empire. Meanwhile, the Greeks used their reprieve wisely, though not without controversy. In Athens, a politician named Themistocles argued passionately that the city's future lay with sea power. He convinced the Athenians to use the profits from newly discovered silver mines at Laurium to build a fleet of triremes, the cutting-edge warships of the ancient world. By 480 B.C.E., Athens possessed the largest navy in Greece, with over 200 vessels. This decision would prove crucial, but it also reflected a deeper strategic insight. Themistocles understood that any Persian invasion would require massive logistical support, which could only come by sea. If the Greeks could control the seas, they might be able to cut Persian supply lines and make a massive invasion unsustainable. The other major development during this period was the gradual emergence of Greek unity. The bitter rivalries between city-states didn't disappear, but the Persian threat forced a degree of cooperation that had never before existed. In 481 BCE, representatives from various Greek cities met at Corinth to form the Hellenic League, a military alliance dedicated to resisting Persian invasion. The alliance was fragile and incomplete. Many Greek cities remained neutral or even sided with Persia, but it represented something new in Greek politics: the subordination of local interests to a broader Greek identity. Sparta, despite its traditional isolationism, agreed to lead the coalition's land forces, while Athens would command the allied fleet. In 480 BCE, Xerxes launched the largest military expedition the ancient world had ever seen. Ancient sources speak of armies numbering in the millions, fleets of over 1,000 ships, and supply trains that stretched for days across the landscape. While these numbers are certainly exaggerated, modern historians estimate that Xerxes' force included perhaps 200,000 to 300,000 combat troops, plus an enormous support apparatus. The logistical achievement alone was staggering. To transport his army from Asia to Europe, Xerxes ordered the construction of boat bridges across the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating Asia from Europe. When storms destroyed the first bridges, he had the sea whipped and chains thrown into the water as punishment, demonstrating both the resources at his disposal and his absolute determination to succeed. The Persian strategy was to advance along the coast, with the army and navy supporting each other. This would allow them to maintain supply lines while using their numerical superiority to overwhelm any Greek resistance. It was a sound plan that had worked throughout the Persian expansion, but it would face unprecedented challenges in the mountainous terrain of Greece. The Greeks, meanwhile, had been forced to make difficult strategic decisions. With such overwhelming numbers approaching, they could not hope to defend every city or region. Instead, they had to choose where to make their stands, trading space for time, while looking for opportunities to inflict maximum damage on the Persian forces. The first major confrontation came at Thermopylae, a narrow coastal pass in central Greece. The name means hot gates, referring to the hot springs in the area, but it would become synonymous with heroic sacrifice and defiant courage. Here, a small Greek force would attempt to hold off the entire Persian army, buying time for the main Greek forces to prepare their defenses. The Greek force at Thermopylae was led by King Leonidas of Sparta, one of the two Spartan kings and a veteran warrior in his 60s. With him were 300 elite Spartan warriors, all fathers of living sons, to ensure the continuation of their bloodlines, plus several thousand allies from other Greek cities. The total Greek force numbered perhaps 7,000 men, facing a Persian army that outnumbered them by at least 30-1. The choice of Thermopylae was strategically sound. The pass was so narrow that the Persians could not use their numerical advantage effectively. Their cavalry would be useless in the rocky terrain, and their archers would have difficulty finding clear lines of sight. If the Greeks could hold the pass, they might force Xerxes to find another route, buying precious time for Greek preparations. For 2 days, the Persians hurled themselves against the Greek position with no success. Wave after wave of attacks broke against the wall of Greek shields and spears. The famous Persian immortals, Xerxes' elite guard, fared no better than common soldiers against the disciplined Greek phalanx. Persian arrows, so thick they were said to darken the sky, proved ineffective against Greek bronze armor and large shields. The tactical superiority of the Greek fighting system was clearly demonstrated. The hoplite phalanx, with its overlapping shields and long spears, was perfectly designed for fighting in narrow spaces. The Persians, accustomed to fighting in open terrain where their mobility and archery could be decisive, found themselves at a severe disadvantage. Xerxes himself watched the slaughter from a golden throne, reportedly leaping up 3 times in anxiety for his army. This was not how the conquest of Greece was supposed to proceed. His forces were being humiliated by a handful of Greeks who refused to acknowledge Persian supremacy. But the Persian Empire had not conquered half the world without learning to adapt. A local Greek named Ephialtes, motivated by the promise of a rich reward, revealed to the Persians the existence of a mountain path that could allow them to bypass the Greek position. This trail, known as the Anapaea Path, would enable Persian forces to attack the Greeks from behind while their main army continued the frontal assault. When Leonidas learned of the betrayal, he faced an impossible choice. He could retreat with his entire force, preserving his men but abandoning the strategic position, or he could fight to the end, knowing that defeat was certain, but hoping that his sacrifice would inspire greater Greek resistance. Leonidas chose death. He dismissed most of the allied forces, keeping only his 300 Spartans, about 700 Thespians who refused to leave, and 400 Thebans of questionable loyalty. These men would make the last stand at Thermopylae, knowing they would not survive but determined to sell their lives dearly. The final day of fighting was apocalyptic. Attacked from front and rear, the Greeks fought with the desperation of doomed men. Ancient sources describe them fighting with broken spears, then swords, then teeth and fingernails when their weapons were gone. Leonidas fell early in the fighting, and a savage battle raged over his body as Greeks and Persians struggled for possession of the Spartan king's corpse. In the end, the Persians triumphed, but the cost was enormous. Thousands of Persian soldiers had died to eliminate a force of barely 1,000 Greeks. More importantly, the tactical and psychological impact of Thermopylae resonated far beyond the narrow pass where it was fought. The Battle of Thermopylae was a military defeat for the Greeks, but it became a psychological victory of immense proportions. The image of 300 Spartans standing against impossible odds, fighting to the death for Greek freedom, captured the imagination of the ancient world and continues to inspire people today. The Spartans' sacrifice demonstrated that Persian numbers could not overcome Greek valor, and that the empire's seemingly invincible army could be made to pay a terrible price for its victories. Word of the battle spread throughout Greece, strengthening resolve and encouraging resistance where there might have been submission. Equally important was the message Thermopylae sent to the Persian Empire itself. Here was proof that the Greeks would not be conquered easily, that every mile of Greek territory would cost precious Persian blood. For an empire accustomed to relatively easy conquests, This was a sobering revelation. The battle also showcased the unique character of Spartan society. The 300 warriors who died at Thermopylae were not desperate men with nothing to lose, but the elite of Spartan society, men with everything to live for who chose death over dishonor. Their wives and mothers, according to Spartan custom, had told them to return with their shields or on them. They chose the latter, and in doing so, they created a legend that would outlive their civilization. The famous epitaph for the Spartan dead, composed by the poet Simonides, captures the essence of their sacrifice. Go tell the Spartans, strangers passing by, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. This was not merely death in battle. It was death in service to an ideal, to a way of life that valued honor above survival. While Thermopylae captured the popular imagination, the real decision of the war came at sea. Themistocles' investment in Athenian naval power proved to be one of the most far-sighted strategic decisions in military history. The Battle of Salamis, fought in September 480 B.C.E., would determine whether Greece remained free or became another Persian satrapy. After forcing the pass at Thermopylae, Xerxes' army continued its advance into central Greece. Athens was evacuated, its population fleeing to the island of Salamis and other safe havens. The Persians occupied the city and burned the Acropolis, fulfilling their promise of revenge for the burning of Sardis. To many observers, it seemed that Greek resistance was crumbling, but Themistocles had a plan. The Persian fleet, numbering perhaps 600 to 800 ships, was formidable but unwieldy. The Greeks had fewer vessels, maybe 370 triremes, but they were fighting in home waters with experienced crews. More importantly, Themistocles believed he could force a battle in the narrow straits between Salamis and the mainland, where Persian numbers would count for less. The Greek strategy required considerable deception. Themistocles sent a trusted slave to the Persian camp with a message claiming that he was willing to betray the Greek cause. According to this false intelligence, the Greek fleet was demoralized and ready to flee if attacked. The Persians, eager to end the campaign quickly, took the bait. On the night before the battle, Persian ships moved to surround the Greek fleet, positioning themselves exactly where Themistocles wanted them. In the narrow waters of the strait, the larger Persian ships became obstacles to each other, while their superior numbers became a liability rather than an asset. The battle began at dawn with the Greeks advancing in a disciplined line while singing their battle hymn, the Paean. The Persians, expecting to face a demoralized enemy in full retreat, instead found themselves confronting a confident and well-organized force in perfect battle formation. What followed was perhaps the most decisive naval battle in ancient history. The heavier Greek triremes designed for ramming attacks proved superior to the lighter Persian vessels in the confined waters. Ship after ship of the Persian fleet was rammed and sunk, while others collided with their own allies in the confusion. Persian discipline, so effective on land, broke down completely in the chaos of naval combat. Xerxes watched the destruction of his fleet from a golden throne erected on a hill overlooking the strait. In a single day, he lost perhaps half of his naval forces, and with them, his ability to supply his massive army in Greece. The invasion, which had seemed unstoppable just days before, suddenly became untenable. The victory at Salamis marked the turning point of the Greco-Persian Wars. Xerxes, recognizing that his position had become precarious, withdrew to Asia with much of his army, leaving his general Mardonius with a smaller force to continue the campaign. But the psychological damage was done. The aura of Persian invincibility had been shattered, and Greek confidence soared. The following year, 479 BCE, saw the final major battles of Xerxes' invasion. At Plataea, a combined Greek army under Spartan leadership decisively defeated Mardonius's forces, killing the Persian general and routing his army. On the same day, according to tradition, Greek forces won a naval victory at Mycale, on the coast of Asia Minor, destroying the remainder of the Persian fleet and encouraging new revolts among the Greek cities of Ionia. These victories completed the transformation of the war from a Persian offensive to a Greek counteroffensive. No longer were the Greeks fighting merely to preserve their independence. They were now fighting to liberate their fellow Greeks still under Persian rule and to secure their position permanently. The Greek victories of 480 to 479 BCE solved the immediate problem of Persian invasion, but they also created new challenges and opportunities. The Persian Empire, while defeated in Greece, remained a powerful force in Asia Minor and the Eastern Mediterranean. Many Greek cities in these regions remained under Persian control, while others that had been liberated needed protection against Persian reconquest. In 478 B.C.E., Athens took the lead in forming a new alliance, the Delian League, ostensibly designed to continue the war against Persia and protect Greek interests in the Aegean. Unlike the Hellenic League that had fought the Persian invasion, this new alliance was dominated by Athens, with other members contributing ships, men, or money to the common cause. Initially, the Delian League was remarkably successful. Greek forces under Athenian leadership won a series of victories against Persian forces, most notably at the Battle of Eurymedon, around 466 B.C.E., where they defeated both Persian land and naval forces on the same day. These victories pushed Persian power away from the Aegean and secured the freedom of many Greek cities. However, the League gradually evolved from a voluntary alliance into an Athenian empire. Athens used its naval supremacy to enforce loyalty among its allies, preventing member cities from withdrawing, and using tribute money to beautify Athens itself. The Parthenon and other monuments of classical Athens were built largely with funds contributed by unwilling allies. The Greco-Persian Wars officially ended around 449 BCE with the Peace of Callias, though the exact terms and even the existence of this treaty are debated by historians. According to most accounts, the agreement established the Aegean Sea as a Greek sphere of influence, while acknowledging Persian control over their traditional territories in Asia Minor. The peace represented a remarkable transformation from the situation 50 years earlier. The Persian Empire, which had seemed poised to conquer all of Greece, had been forced to acknowledge Greek independence and abandon its ambitions in the Aegean. The small, fractured city-states of Greece had not only survived, but had carved out their own sphere of influence at Persian expense. The Greco-Persian Wars left an indelible mark on world history, establishing patterns and precedents that continue to influence global politics and culture today. Perhaps most importantly, these conflicts preserved the independence of Greek civilization at a crucial moment in its development, allowing the flowering of classical Greek culture that would profoundly influence all subsequent Western civilization. The wars demonstrated the power of unity among free peoples facing external domination. Despite their traditional rivalries and frequent conflicts, the Greek city-states were able to cooperate when faced with an existential threat. This cooperation, however temporary and imperfect, showed that shared values could overcome political divisions when survival was at stake. The tactical and strategic innovations developed during these wars had lasting military significance. The superiority of the Greek hoplite phalanx over Persian infantry tactics influenced military thinking for centuries. The importance of naval power, demonstrated at Salamis, became a cornerstone of strategic thinking that remains relevant today. Perhaps most significantly, the wars established a template for resistance to imperial domination that has inspired countless liberation movements throughout history. The image of small, free peoples standing against massive empires resonates through the centuries, from the Roman Republic's resistance to Carthaginian power to modern struggles for national independence. The cultural impact of these wars extends far beyond their immediate military and political consequences. The stories of Marathon, Thermopylae, and Salamis became foundational myths of Western civilization, embodying ideals of courage, sacrifice, and the defense of freedom that continue to inspire people today. The tale of the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae in particular has been retold countless times, most recently in popular films like 300, demonstrating the enduring power of these ancient stories. Greco-Persian Wars represent more than just another ancient conflict between rival powers. They embody the eternal struggle between different visions of human organization and values. On one side stood the Persian Empire, representing efficiency, centralized power, and cultural tolerance within an authoritarian framework. On the other stood the Greek city-states, championing individual liberty, civic participation, and the right of communities to govern themselves according to their own traditions. The Greek victory preserved not just their political independence, but the space for continued experimentation with democratic governance, philosophical inquiry, and artistic expression. Without this victory, The cultural achievements of classical Athens, the philosophical schools of ancient Greece, and the political innovations that would influence the Roman Republic and eventually modern democratic states might never have emerged. Yet the story also carries warnings about the costs of freedom and the challenges of maintaining unity among free peoples. The Greek victory led eventually to the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, demonstrating that shared external threats could unify the Greeks, while their removal revealed deep internal divisions. The transformation of the Delian League from a liberation alliance into an Athenian empire showed how quickly liberators could become oppressors. The Greco-Persian Wars remind us that freedom is never permanently secured, that each generation must be prepared to defend the values and institutions that define their way of life. The Spartans who died at Thermopylae, the Athenians who fought at Marathon, and the allied sailors who triumphed at Salamis were not fighting for abstract principles, but for their right to live as free men in free communities. Their legacy endures not just in the specific political and cultural institutions they preserved, but in the demonstration that courage, unity, and strategic wisdom can overcome seemingly impossible odds. In an age when democratic values again face challenges from authoritarian powers, the example of ancient Greece reminds us that freedom is worth fighting for, and that free peoples, when united, possess resources that no empire can ultimately overcome. The clash between East and West that began on the plains of Marathon continues to echo through history, reminding us that the struggle between empire and independence, between authoritarian efficiency and democratic messiness, between security and liberty, is eternal. The Greeks chose liberty, and in doing so, they changed the course of human civilization. Their choice and its consequences remain relevant today as we continue to grapple with the same fundamental questions about how human societies should be organized and governed. In the end, the Greco-Persian Wars were about more than territory or tribute or political dominance. They were about competing visions of human potential and dignity. The Greek victory ensured that the world would have both models to study and learn from, rather than seeing one vision eliminate the other entirely. In that sense, these ancient battles remain vitally relevant to our modern world, offering both inspiration and warning as we continue to navigate the eternal tension between order and freedom, between security and liberty, between empire and independence. If this journey through the origins of warfare intrigued you, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and follow us for more deep dives into the moments that shaped human history. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and keep exploring the past to understand the present.